everyone, I'm Ashley at the Silver Bay Public Library, and welcome to Storytime. For this Storytime, as you may know, we read a chapter book, which is a bit more of a higher level read than the picture books I normally read, but anyone at any age can feel free to come and join us Monday, Wednesday, Friday to hear new chapters, sometimes more than one chapter, for Storytime, of our lovely book that we are currently reading, which is Floors by Patrick Carman. Patrick Carman's a great author, so make sure to check out this series, of course, and then all his other books. Last time we read chapters 4 and 5, and this time we're going to start up at chapter 6. Chapter 6 is Theodore Bump and the Troublesome Robot. So let us jump right in. By the time Leo reached the lobby, the hotel was ready for the night. Rummy had fallen asleep in one of the big chairs while his mother quietly dusted the brass handrails. Miss Sparks was nowhere to be seen, off on a rampage searching for Leo all over the hotel. Leo tucked the 2 boxes beneath the nearest sculpted green bush, it was in the shape of a rabbit, and turned to send the duck elevator back up to the roof. Betty was sitting down in it, nestled in a ball, which was very unlike her. "Are you okay? You must be hungry." Leo felt terrible. He loved animals, and he'd put Betty through quite an adventure. The poor thing could barely keep her eyes open. "I'm sending you back to the roof now," Leo whispered. "You'll find some food in the pond." He closed the duck elevator and pushed the buttons for the roof. "Where have you been? Everyone's looking for you." Rummy had woken and tiptoed over in the dim light of the lobby, scaring Leo half to death. "Don't sneak up on me like that." "Sorry, it's a habit of mine. I like to sneak." Rummy's mop of dark hair was messy from sleep, and he'd loosened his kid-sized bow tie. Sneaking might come in handy," said Leo. "Just don't sneak up on me." Rummy smiled widely and stole a look back into the main lobby. "I'm going to leave in a minute, but I'll be back in the morning. Can I keep the 2-way radio?" "Of course you can," said Leo. "You're my partner after all." "Right?" Rummy was growing on Leo, but more importantly, Leo was going to need his help in order to find all the boxes and get to the bottom of what was going on. "I could sneak away from the door if you want," Rummy offered. "How?" asked Leo, assuming Miss Sparks' evil eye was on the door all day long. Miss Sparks has errands tomorrow afternoon, so my mom will work the front desk. She said she'd watch the door so I could explore if I wanted to, as long as I didn't go looking for cupcakes." "Are there cupcakes up there?" Remy looked up at the ceiling curiously, licking his lips. "You've never been upstairs?" asked Leo. He had such free reign of the hotel, it hadn't occurred to him that others might not share the same privilege. "Are you kidding me? I've only been here one day, and I spend every waking moment standing at that dull front door. It's torture." Remy looked at the ceiling again. "How many cupcakes are up there?" "Forget about the cupcakes, Remy. We've got more important things to think about. Right now I have to get these boxes to the basement and avoid Miss Sparks." "Boxes?" said Remy, for he'd only seen the purple box. Leo cringed. He'd spilled the beans. "You found another box? That's awesome!" Remy glanced around the lobby, searching for hidden boxes. "They must be important, right? The first one's got Morganzer's head on it and everything. Wait a second, you said the purple box had duck food in it." "I barely knew you back then," said Leo. "I had to come up with something. For all I knew, you were working for Miss Sparks." "Are you kidding? She won't even give me a bathroom break." But Remy wasn't hurt. He'd understood that it took at least 6 or 7 hours to cultivate a trusting relationship. "So what's in the boxes?" he asked. Before Leo could answer, a voice splashed with a rich Spanish accent filled the lobby. "Remilio, time to go, sweetie." "Mom, don't call me that. It's embarrassing." "Leo?" Pilar said, finding them at the duck elevator. "You'd better head for the basement before Miss Sparks finds you. She needs some cooling off time." Leo couldn't help thinking Remy's mom was about to see the 2 boxes tucked up beneath the rabbit bush, but it was Remy who spied them. Leo could see it in his round saucer eyes. "And you, little hombre," said Pilar, putting an arm around her son. "We better get you home. You have a long day at the door tomorrow." Remy groaned in agony at the thought of standing in the lobby with Miss Sparks all day. But he brightened when he remembered what his mother had told him. "I'll show you around the place tomorrow afternoon," said Leo, reading Remy's thoughts. "I know the whippet inside and out." Pilar was happy to see her son had made a friend in Leo, whom she'd always adored, and Leo liked her too. She covered for him with Miss Sparks lots of times. "Skip the cake room, okay?" she said playfully, messing Remy's hair. "You got it," said Leo. You guys can team up all you want, Remy smiled. But if there's a cake room in this place, I'll find it. Remy left with his mom and Leo grabbed the boxes, heading for the basement. When he came to the bottom step and creaked the door open slowly, he peeked inside, hoping not to see his dad drinking iced tea and reading the New York Times, old copies of which stood in 3 towering piles next to his bed. Dad, you in there? Leo whispered. The basement wasn't huge, but it was very cluttered. Pipes, boxes, the call center, the boiler, the washer, the clothesline, and a lot more. No one answered, so Leo crept inside, took the boxes apart, and hid them under his cot, sighing with relief. At least the boxes were safely hidden, even if he was in trouble for going missing for several hours. Leo heard the sound of the toilet flushing the small bathroom off in the corner and realized he wasn't alone after all. He had a few seconds, though, which was just enough time to leave something on his dad's pillow. I thought I heard you come in, Leo's dad said. It was true, Clarence Fillmore was a big guy, but he was more of a teddy bear than a growler. He didn't have it in him to scold Leo for disappearing. You know, he said as he sat down, you're getting older now. If you need time to yourself, it's okay. Just let me know where you are so I don't worry that you've fallen down the elevator shaft. Sorry, Dad, said Leo. It won't happen again. And I got the ducks back to the roof for you. You know how Miss Sparks gets if we leave them on the grounds too long. Thanks, Dad. Even at his young age, Leo knew his dad was a little bit broken, a little bit sad. There were reasons for this that Leo didn't like to think about, but one thing he knew for sure. He wouldn't lie to his dad, because he loved him too much. There would be no elaborate yarn about where he'd been that his father would probably believe. Good luck avoiding the wrath of Miss Sparks, though, Mr. Fillmore said. I can't save you from that. Leo held his breath, waiting for his dad to see, wondering if he'd done the right thing. What's that? The big man said, seeing the ring on his pillow and picking it up. The moment he did, Leo knew he'd made the right choice. I found it for you, said Leo, which was true. Leo's dad didn't say anything. He stared at the ring as he lolled over and laid back on the sinking cot, moving it to the light. I don't know how you did it, but thank you. They looked at each other, then, smiling in a bittersweet sort of way. The ring had been missing a long time, but it was back now. It had belonged to Leo's mother. Leo got up before light the next morning and went straight to the roof. He was too nervous to look inside the blue box with his dad snoring so nearby, but he knew by mid-morning the basement would be empty and he could safely investigate. Leo brought the ducks down and walked them through the lobby, all in a perfect line, out the door and onto the vast grounds. It was a short walk, partly because he knew Miss Sparks would soon arrive and he wanted to avoid seeing her, but also because Betty was in a foul mood. You miss McGanzer, don't you? Leo asked, but she wouldn't look at him. Leo took the ducks safely back to the roof and returned to the basement, intent on starting his father's coffee brewing. How about we go to the big breakfast this morning, Mr. Fillmore said. I have a feeling we're going to need it. Leo began to protest because it would mean seeing Miss Sparks, but then he reasoned that A, he could not avoid her forever, B, breakfast at the Whippet was hard to resist, and C, it was a good sign that his dad wanted to eat breakfast with everyone. He'd been keeping to himself more and more, staying in the maintenance tunnels, avoiding contact with just about everyone. Breakfast at the Whippet was brought over from the restaurant and served family-style in the puzzle room, which was just off the lobby, across from the duck elevator. It was the one time where all the guests and staff members were invited to dine together. Often Leo was so busy during the day that he neglected lunch altogether and scarfed down a late dinner, so the big breakfast was a must if he could get it. Leo Fillmore, said Miss Sparks as he stepped foot into the puzzle room. Sit here, next to me. Leo looked at Remy, who was ashen with concern for his friend, but there was nothing either of them could do. Pass the hash browns, said Liliane Pompadour, and Leo sat down. Miss Sparks was silent as Leo loaded his plate with eggs, bacon, and blueberries. She had half a grapefruit and 2 vitamins, which struck Leo as one of the saddest things he'd ever seen, given the choices she had. With Mr. Whippet gone, I'm in charge, she said, only loud enough for Leo to hear as the guests and the staff talked and laughed. I do know that, yes, said Leo, trying to be as contrite as he could, for he knew this would please Miss Sparks. I could hire a new maintenance man. How would that be? Leo looked at Miss Sparks, frightened of what it would mean if they were tossed out onto the street. He would never forgive himself if he got his father fired from the Whippet. Out with the old, in with the new. It has a certain ring to it, don't you think? Leo knew better than to grovel or make promises. Miss Sparks would not respond to such tactics. He took a bite of bacon, chewing quietly as her voice grew louder so everyone could hear. Mr. Bumps is having trouble with the robot again, she declared. I want you up there the moment you finish that disgusting plate of food. Yes, ma'am, said Leo. And bring him some breakfast. Leo nodded. Remy, who was in love with robots, piped in. You got robots up there? He ventured, plugging down some milk as he waited for an answer. Yes, said Miss Sparks, staring at Pilar as she continued. We got robots up there. Not that you'll be seeing them anytime soon. The accusing look seemed to indicate one of two things. Either Miss Sparks thought Pilar had done a poor job teaching her child English, or she was sending a veiled threat to the maid. Don't let your little urchin out of the lobby while I'm gone, or else. Leo looked down the table and saw that everyone but Mr. Bump and Mr. Yancey had shown up. His dad was there, wearing the ring on a chain around his neck, which pleased Leo immensely. Miss Pompadour was holding Heine, feeding him bits of sausage, and yammering with Miss Yancey, the old tycoon's wife. The bratty little girl, Jane Yancey, was downing powdered white donuts with frightening efficiency, and Mr. Pips stood with Captain Rickenbacker drinking coffee and staring at the puzzle. The puzzle was unusual for its size. There were 800,000 pieces, which sat in pyramid-shaped piles on the longest table in the hotel. The length of 12 pool tables, to be exact. It's coming along nicely, said Captain Rickenbacker, gazing over the long table. Mr. Phipps didn't quite agree as he stared at the piles of pieces and the slight progress that had taken place in the many years he'd been at the hotel, which were many. I would have hoped for better by now, he said, but the edges do look quite nice. He'd been the one to complete the edge of the puzzle with Merganser's help about a year before, after which Merganser had whispered a secret to the old gardener. There are 223 ducks pictured in the puzzle, and a pond, and I'm in there too. He had slapped Mr. Phipps on the back, nearly knocking the black freckles off his old dark face, and added, That should get you moving in the right direction. Mr. Phipps loved Merganser, but he had no illusions about the puzzle. Clue or no clue, the puzzle would never be finished. It was just too big and too hard. Ducks, you say, said Captain Rickenbacker, for Mr. Phipps had let slip a secret. Ducks. Does this look like a duck? Asked the captain, holding up a single yellow piece. Mr. Phipps said that he thought it did, then walked to the other end of the table, leaving Captain Rickenbacker to hunt for the pieces on his own. Why do they waste time on that ridiculous thing? I have no idea, said Miss Sparks, looking at the two men in disbelief. It's a Zen thing, said Clarence Fillmore, like meditation or a rock garden. What on earth are you babbling about? Said Miss Sparks, who had no patience for mystical talk of any kind. She leaned over the table and turned her head to stare at Leo's father, her tall beehive hairdo precariously close to touching a pile of pancakes. I don't think finishing the puzzle is the idea, said Mr. Fillmore. Miss Sparks was clearly unimpressed. I have a mind to take Pilar's vacuum to the whole mess and use the table for firewood. The attention was off of Leo, so he bolted from his chair, gathering a plate of baked goods from Mr. Bump, as he gave Remy a look that said, Keep your radio on. I'll be calling you. All Remy could think about was standing at the maddeningly dull door all morning, thinking about robots and cupcakes. Afternoon couldn't come soon enough. Are you alone? The voice came from behind the door to Theodore Bump's room on the 4th floor. I am, said Leo. Hand me my breakfast, Mr. Bump said, his arm sliding out from the cracked open door. Leo put the plate in his hand, the door swung open a bit more, and then the plate and the arm were gone. A moment later, the door flew open, and Theodore Bump grabbed Leo by the arm, hauling him inside and slamming the door shut behind them. Can't be too careful, wouldn't you agree? He asked Leo. I agree, said Leo. He had come to learn that more often than not in the Whippet Hotel, short and agreeable answers were safest. The room was fabulous. There were no two ways about it. If it weren't for his eccentric guest, Theodore Bump, Leo would have liked to spend more time there. He was a kid after all, and kids loved robots. Theodore Bump went to his desk and sat down, typing something out on a computer as he munched on a muffin. A familiar banging sound was coming from a room in the back, but Leo ignored it for the moment. I'm right in the middle of this, you understand? You'll have to deal with the problem yourself. Okay, said Leo. He couldn't know if the rumors were true. No one knew. According to his father and Pilar, who cleaned the room now and then, Mr. Bump was a writer. That part wasn't so unusual. It was what he wrote, and how much, that made the rumors swirl. It was said that Theodore Bump wrote 3 novels a month under a total of 9 assumed names. Pilar went so far as to say they weren't just any novels under any old names, but famous novels and famous names. To hear it from her, Mr. Bump had written about half of the most popular books around. Leo watched Mr. Bump type at lightning speed for a moment more. Then the man turned in his threadbare blue robe and stared at the boy. His gray hair matted on one side as if he'd gone out of bed and gone straight to the keyboard. "I don't like to be watched while I work. Do you mind?" he asked. "Of course not," said Leo. When Theodore Bump turned back to the screen, Leo leaned in closely behind him and tried to see what the man was writing. He thought he saw a wildly famous writer's name, but he couldn't be sure. He left Theodore Bump and followed the banging sound at the other end of the room. The place was completely overrun with robots. Some of the robots were small and sat in clusters on tables and shelves. Others were 2 or 3 feet tall and stood on the floor with nothing whatsoever to do. Mr. Bump had turned them all off because they made too much noise. Then there were the bigger robots, some of them larger than Leo, and most of them with minds of their own. One made the bed, another vacuumed, another dusted all the other robots, and one dispensed snacks. These Mr. Bump allowed to work, so long as they didn't bother him. Merganser had programmed them all himself, and he personally kept them in tip-top shape, visiting the robot room just about every day to check on them before he'd vanished. Leo passed by a large, padded room where the really big robots were kept. There were 3. Clink, Clank, and Clunk, and all were over 10 feet tall. He was tempted to turn them on and watch them fight one another, which was highly entertaining, but it made an awful racket, and Theodore Bump would surely report Leo to Miss Sparks. Still, how could he see them standing there, heads bowed, silently staring at the floor without turning them on? He promised himself he would return someday, soon, when Mr. Bump was out for a walk and watched the robots rumble. Maybe he'd even bring Remy. In Merganser's absence, there was one particular robot that was causing Mr. Bump a lot of problems. His name was Blop. Blop's job was keeping company and making conversation, which meant he was programmed to talk with guests in the room and make them feel at home. Unfortunately for Blop, Theodore Bump was never in the mood for conversation. In fact, Theodore Bump was so antisocial that it had begun frying Blop's circuitry. The more Theodore didn't talk to Blop, the more Blop felt he needed to talk. Sometimes he would go on and on and on and on about things no one wanted to talk about. He'd gone from being an interesting companion to an annoying chatterbox. Leo arrived at the door of the bathroom, the loud noise echoing inside. He opened the door and there was Blop, standing in the bathtub, hanging his head over and over again, banging his head over and over again on the porcelain. Blop was a small robot about the size of a mug for hot chocolate. He was mostly silver, with large green eyes, and his metal mouth looked like it was made to eat nickels and quarters. When Blop saw that Leo had come into the bathroom, he rolled back and forth enthusiastically on his wheels. "Mr. Bump, is that you?" "No, it's me, Leo." Leo knelt down and laid his arms along the tub, setting his chin down on his hands as he stared at Blop. One thing was clear to Leo, as he looked at the shiny silver robot in the tub. Mr. Bump wasn't a violent man, for if he were, he would have picked Blop up and dropped him out the window long ago. "Oh, Blop," said Leo, "you really must stop bothering Mr. Bump. You know how it upsets him." "Very good to see you, sir," said Blop in his usual tiny, tiny voice. "You're looking excellent as usual. Tip-top." The problem with Blop, besides the fact that he would really not stop talking, was that he was a sneaky little robot. "Will you get me out of the tub?" he requested. "There's work to be done." "You know he won't talk to you," said Leo. It was like trying to reason with an unreasonable child. He knew, but he had to try. "I could leave you in there, He'll come around," said Blop. "I'm going to try Shakespeare." "I could leave you in there and let your batteries run dry," Leo pointed out. "Oh, you don't want to do that. My alarm will go off." Merganser had rigged Blop with a terrible alarm that would sound throughout the entire building if he got within 5% of a dead battery. It had only happened once, and Miss Sparks nearly lost her marbles, screaming at everyone for days after. Even Merganser had said it was something to be avoided at all costs. "Besides," said Blop, "I'm solar-powered, as you know, and efficient. You'd have to leave me here in the tub for 3 days, 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 9 seconds in order to hear the alarm." Blop started carrying on about solar power and alternative energy, and how he and Merganser had talked at length about putting wind turbines on the roof, but then he worried for the ducks, and on and on and on, until Leo thought he might leave Blop where he was and shut the door. Instead, Leo picked him up and placed him in his tool bag. "Might I see Mr. Bump now?" asked Blop. "I'd like to begin with the sonnets, which I believe he'll really enjoy." Leo knew better than to engage Blop in conversation if he didn't need to. He kept walking until he reached the front door. "I'll take him for a walk," he said to Mr. Bump. "Don't bring him back until you hit Friday at least. Anything less would be a disappointment." Theodore Bump didn't look up from his computer as he kept typing with one hand and held out the empty breakfast plate to Leo with the other. Once in the hallway, Leo let Blop talk all he wanted. It would take all day to run him out of words, which was what Mr. Bump had referred to. Blop preferred to say 10,000 words a day. After that, he calmed down considerably. He would roll off into a corner and mumble quietly to himself, as if he were having robot dreams and talking softly in his sleep. Friday was 3 days away, so Leo would have to keep Blop talking for at least 30,000 words. He had an idea about how he could accomplish the task without having to carry the little robot around all day, and he was thinking about just that when his walkie-talkie came to life. "Leo, get to the basement, pronto!" It was his dad, who rarely sounded frantic about much of anything lately. "I see you have a Phillips screwdriver in your bag," said Blop, who had burrowed his way inside the satchel. And then he carried on about the origins of a great many tools as Leo ran down the maintenance stairs to the basement. And that, my friends, is chapter 6. We are going to leave that there for today as it was a pretty long chapter. I'm going to oh my gosh. Well, I will bookmark the book for chapter 7 once I pick that up in a second. But I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Please make sure to come back on Friday for chapter 7. And yes, thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.